Tacky old woman. You're just bitter because my son have money, my daughter shouted at. They gathered their things quickly after that. Designer coats, expensive phones, keys to cars I couldn't afford to fill with gas. Angela kissed my cheek, the kind of kiss you give strangers at church. Have you ever felt your heart break and your blood boil at the same time? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I stood in that Kentucky courthouse holding a document that would destroy my own daughter's marriage. The same daughter who called me a tacky old woman in front of my grandson just hours before. Because the fortune her husband bragged about? It was built on my late husband's blood, sweat, and a secret I'd kept for 20 years. Have you ever been humiliated by someone you raised with your own hands? Have you ever watched your child choose money over love? Has someone you trusted ever thrown your sacrifices back in your face? This is about a mother's ultimate betrayal, and her ultimate revenge. Stay with me, because what I did next will either make you cheer or question everything you believe about family loyalty. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family success story. Let me take you back to the morning that changed 3 generations forever. The words hit harder than any slap. Grandma, you're just jealous because we have what you never could afford. My grandson Tyler said it while standing in my kitchen, his mother Angela nodding approval behind him. The morning sun streamed through my worn curtains, highlighting every crack in my linoleum floor, every faded photograph on my walls. The smell of fresh coffee grew cold as I watched my own family judge me in my own home. Angela adjusted her designer purse, the one that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Mama, we're trying to help you understand reality. Marcus comes from real money. Old money. The kind that builds legacies. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. Marcus, her husband of 3 years, stood silent by the door like he was afraid my poverty might be contagious. His Italian leather shoes probably cost more than I spent on clothes all year. You live in this tiny house, driving that old car, Angela continued, her voice getting sharper. When was the last time you bought something nice for yourself? When was the last time you traveled anywhere? The photos on my mantle stared back at me. Pictures of her graduation, her wedding, family cookouts where everyone smiled. Back when she still hugged me like she meant it. Back when money wasn't the only thing that mattered. I raised you better than this, I whispered. You raised me poor, Mama. There's a difference. Tyler grabbed a cookie from my jar, the same jar I'd kept filled for him since he was 3. Dad's company just got another $1 million contract. We're buying a house in Lexington. With a pool, Angela added, like that explained everything. Marcus finally spoke. Mrs. Mitchell, we appreciate everything you did, but Angela deserves better than. He gestured around my living room, this. Have you ever felt your heart break and your blood boil at the same time? That's what it feels like when the people you sacrificed everything for decide you're not worth their time anymore. They gathered their things quickly after that. Designer coats, expensive phones, keys to cars I couldn't afford to fill with gas. Angela kissed my cheek, the kind of kiss you give strangers at church. We'll call you, she lied. Love you, Grandma, Tyler said, but his eyes were already on his phone. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a judge's gavel. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the silence they left behind. 43 years of raising that girl. 43 years of choosing her needs over my wants. And this was my reward. I walked to the window and watched their BMW pull away. Angela was probably already planning how to spend Marcus's next paycheck. Tyler was probably texting friends about his new pool. And Marcus? He was probably congratulating himself on handling the old lady so smoothly. But they made one mistake. They assumed I was just a poor widow with nothing left to fight with. As their car disappeared around the corner, I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the safety deposit box key I hadn't touched in 20 years. The key my husband James made me promise to keep safe. The key that held secrets worth more than Marcus's fancy cars and designer suits combined. What would you do if your own family threw your love back in your face like garbage? Would you stay quiet and accept their judgment? Or would you remind them exactly who they were dealing with? Because I was about to show them that some old ladies have more fight in them than anyone expects. First National Bank of Ohio smelled like old money and broken dreams. I'd been there exactly 3 times in 20 years, once when James died, once when I refinanced the house, and now. My hands shook as I signed the paperwork, but not from fear. From excitement. The safety deposit box sat in front of me like a metal coffin full of secrets. Inside were documents that would make Marcus's million-dollar contracts look like pocket change. Legal papers that would wipe the smug smile off Angela's face forever. The bank clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, gave me privacy. Take all the time you need, Mrs. Mitchell. I lifted the metal lid and 20 years melted away. James's handwriting stared back at me from yellowed contracts and faded letterheads. His construction business had been small, but he was smart. Smarter than anyone gave him credit for. Especially Marcus's family. The first document made my heart race. A loan agreement dated 1999. Patterson Construction Company, Marcus's grandfather's business, had borrowed $500,000 from James Mitchell Construction for equipment and materials. The interest rate was fair, the terms reasonable. But they never paid it back. The second document hit like lightning. A partnership agreement where James provided materials and labor for 3 major projects in Louisville. Projects that built Patterson Construction's reputation. Projects they took full credit for while James stayed quiet, like he always did. But the third document? The third document was pure gold. A promissory note signed by Marcus's father, acknowledging debt to James's estate in the amount of $2.3 million, including 20 years of compound interest. Money they owed my family. Money that made Marcus's old money fortune look like what it really was, stolen wealth built on my husband's back. I remembered the night James told me about the deal. We were in bed, his calloused hands tracing gentle circles on my back while he explained his business plans. His breath was warm against my ear as he whispered about securing our family's future. "Baby, this contract will set our family free," he'd said, his fingers finding all the places that made me sigh. "But we keep it quiet until the time is right. Promise me you'll wait for the right moment." "How will I know when it's right?" I'd asked, turning in his arms to face him. He'd kissed me deep and slow, the way he did when he was making promises. "You'll know. Trust me, Dorothy. You'll know." Now I knew. I photocopied everything twice, then locked the originals back in the box. The copies went into my purse, right next to the phone number for Patterson Construction's legal department. Walking out of that bank, I felt different. Taller. Stronger. Like the woman James fell in love with all those years ago, before poverty and widowhood tried to shrink me down to nothing. Angela thought she married into money. Marcus thought his family built their fortune through hard work and smart business. They had no idea their mansion was built on debt to a tacky old woman from Ohio. I sat in my old Honda and pulled out my phone. The law office number was still in James's address book, written in his careful handwriting. Mr. Patterson, Marcus's family lawyer, the same man who'd helped them steal from us for decades. My fingers dialed before I could change my mind. "Patterson, Holbrook, and Associates. This is Dorothy Mitchell. I need to schedule an appointment with Mr. Patterson regarding the Mitchell estate." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Patterson only handles large estate matters. Tell him it's about the $2.3 million his clients owe my family. I think he'll make time." The silence on the other end was beautiful. "Please hold. What would you do if you discovered your family's wealth was built on a lie? If the people who looked down on you were actually living off money that belonged to you? Would you demand justice or keep the peace?" Because I was about to find out exactly how much my peace was worth. And I promise you, the answer was going to shock everyone, including me. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, silver hair framing determined brown eyes that hadn't looked this fierce in years. On my dresser, James's photograph seemed to nod approval, his gentle smile encouraging me like it did when he was alive. The appointment with Mr. Patterson was set for Thursday. 3 days to decide if I wanted to destroy my daughter's marriage or let her keep living a lie built on stolen money. 3 days to choose between being a tacky old woman or the righteous widow James always believed I could be. My phone buzzed. A text from Angela. Mama, sorry about earlier. You know I love you. Just want what's best for everyone. Too little, too late. I walked to my closet and pulled out the midnight blue dress James bought for our 25th anniversary. He'd saved for months to afford it, surprising me with the box on a random Tuesday because he said I deserved beautiful things every day, not just special occasions. You look like royalty in blue, he'd whispered that night, his fingers slowly unzipping the back while promising I'd never want for anything as long as he lived. He'd kept that promise, even from the grave. The documents in that safety deposit box were proof that James Mitchell had been a king who made sure his queen would never be left defenseless. I slipped into the dress. It still fit perfectly. In the mirror, I saw the woman who'd stood beside James through every business deal, every late night, every dream that seemed impossible until we made it real together. The woman who deserved respect, not pity. My phone rang. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. Grandma? Mom said I was rude earlier. I'm sorry. It's okay, baby. She's buying me a car for my 16th birthday. A BMW like Dad's. That's nice. My voice stayed calm, but my fingers gripped the phone tighter. Grandma? Are you really jealous of us having money? The innocence in his question broke my heart. This child had no idea his college fund was built on money stolen from his grandfather's legacy. No idea his mother was living a lie that was about to explode in her face. No, Tyler. I'm not jealous. I'm just tired of being invisible. You're not invisible to me. I know, baby. I love you. After he hung up, I sat on my bed and opened James's old Bible. Inside the front cover, in his careful handwriting, for Dorothy, the strongest woman I know. Never let anyone make you feel small. J. If your own family disrespected you, would you fight back or keep the peace? Would you choose temporary harmony over permanent justice? I thought about Angela's designer purse. Marcus's expensive shoes. Their BMW, their new house with a pool, their plans for Tyler's future. All of it built on money they'd stolen from us, money they thought we were too poor and powerless to claim. But I wasn't powerless. I was James Mitchell's widow, and he'd left me weapons they didn't even know existed. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the law office number. My finger hovered over the call button. Once I made this call, there would be no going back. Angela might never forgive me. Tyler might never understand. Our family might never recover. But respect isn't given. It's taken. I pressed call. Patterson, Holbrook, and Associates. This is Dorothy Mitchell. I'd like to move my appointment to tomorrow morning. Let me check. Yes, Mr. Patterson can see you at 9 a.m. Perfect. Tell him to bring the files on Patterson Construction Company. All of them. We have 20 years of business to discuss. I hung up and walked back to the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't a tacky old woman anymore. She was a warrior in a blue dress, armed with truth and ready for war. What I did next would either make my family respect me or lose me forever. But I'd rather be respected than pitted, feared than ignored. Tomorrow, Marcus's family would learn that some debts can't be buried with the people who made them. And Angela would discover that her mama wasn't as powerless as she thought. The choice was made. The dress was chosen. The appointment was set. Let the reckoning begin. My kitchen table became a command center covered with 20 years of secrets. Bank statements, contracts, promissory notes, and correspondence spread across the surface like battle plans. Each document was a weapon James had left me, carefully organized and copied in triplicate. The weight of justice felt good in my hands. I made a timeline on legal paper, James's neat handwriting guiding me through every transaction. 1999. Initial loan to Patterson Construction. 2001, partnership agreement for the Louisville projects. 2003, additional equipment financing. 2005, the final promissory note that Marcus's father signed, acknowledging the family debt. Every signature was real. Every amount was documented. Every cent was owed to James Mitchell's estate, which meant it belonged to me now. I found James's old calculator and ran the numbers. Principal plus 20 years of compound interest at the agreed rate came to $4.7 million. More money than Angela and Marcus had spent on their fancy lifestyle. More than enough to buy respect from people who thought I was beneath them. While organizing the papers, I discovered something that made my heart race: James's love letters, tucked between business documents like pressed flowers in a book. His bold handwriting promised to make love to you in our mansion someday, and I could almost feel his urgent hands against my skin, the way he'd press me against the wall after closing big deals. Dorothy, my queen, one letter read, when this is over, we'll have everything we dreamed of. But more than that, we'll have each other. I touched his signature, remembering the night he wrote it. We'd been young then, hungry for success and for each other. He'd make love to me with promises on his lips and ambition in his touch, both of us believing the future would be everything we wanted. He'd kept his promise, just not the way either of us expected. The phone rang, startling me back to the present. Angela's number. Mama? I'm coming over. We need to talk. About what? About this morning. I feel terrible about what Tyler said. Marcus and I want to apologize properly. I looked at the documents spread across my table. When? Now. We're in the driveway. My heart hammered, but my voice stayed steady. I'll put on coffee. I quickly gathered the papers and locked them in James's old briefcase. The one he carried to every important meeting. The one that made him feel professional and powerful when we had nothing but dreams and determination. Through my front window, I watched Angela and Marcus walk up my driveway. She carried flowers, grocery store daisies, probably grabbed as an afterthought. He carried his phone, already checking messages like this was just another business appointment. They knocked softly, like they were afraid to disturb me. Come in, I called, meeting them at the door. Angela hugged me carefully, the way you embrace someone fragile. Mama, I'm so sorry about this morning. We were stressed about the move and took it out on you. Marcus nodded, his expensive cologne filling my small living room. Mrs. Mitchell, we didn't mean to sound ungrateful. You did a good job raising Angela. Did a good job. Like I was a contractor they were reviewing. Sit down, I said, gesturing to my worn sofa. I'll get the coffee. In the kitchen, I steadied myself against the counter. They were here to manage me, to smooth over the morning's cruelty with hollow apologies and cheap flowers. They thought a few kind words would put me back in my place, the grateful poor mother who accepted scraps of attention. They had no idea I was about to serve them a meal they'd never forget. I returned with coffee in my best cups, the china set James bought me for our 10th anniversary. Angela accepted hers with a grateful smile. Marcus held his like it might be contaminated. Mama, we want to help you, Angela said, her voice dripping with false concern. Maybe we could look at your finances, see if there's a way to improve your situation. What situation is that? Well. She glanced around my living room, taking in my old furniture and faded carpet. You're clearly struggling. The house needs work, your car is ancient, you never go anywhere or buy anything nice. Marcus leaned forward, his business voice taking over. We could set up a small monthly allowance. Nothing dramatic, but enough to help with expenses. An allowance. Like I was a child who needed pocket money. That's very generous, I said quietly. It's the least we can do, Angela said, reaching over to pat my hand. You sacrifice so much for family. The phone rang in the kitchen. I excused myself to answer it. Mrs. Mitchell? This is Jennifer from Patterson, Holbrook and Associates. Mr. Patterson wanted to confirm your 9 a.m. appointment tomorrow. He's reviewed the preliminary files and is very interested in discussing the Mitchell estate matters. Tell him I'll be there, I said, making sure my voice carried to the living room. And Jennifer? Make sure he brings everything. 20 years of everything. I hung up and walked back to find Angela and Marcus exchanging worried glances. Everything okay, Mama? Angela asked. I smiled and lifted my coffee cup in a toast. Everything's perfect, baby. Just taking care of some old business. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went pale. Angela, we need to go. But we just got here. Now. His voice was sharp, urgent. Something's come up at the office. They gathered their things quickly, Angela's flowers forgotten on my coffee table. As they reached the door, Marcus turned back. Mrs. Mitchell, about that phone call, if you need any legal advice, my family's law firm would be happy to help. No charge. I smiled sweetly. That's kind of you, Marcus. But I think your family's done enough for mine already. The door closed behind them, and I walked to my briefcase. Tomorrow morning, would walk into that Louisville law office carrying proof that would change everything. Angela would learn that her mama wasn't as powerless as she looked. Marcus would discover that his family's fortune was built on stolen ground. And I would finally get what James always promised me: respect, justice, and the satisfaction of watching our enemies realize they'd underestimated the wrong woman. The phone rang again. Angela's number. Mama, please don't do anything rash. Whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything, sweetheart. I'm just cleaning house. What would you do if your family dismissed you, then panicked when they realized you had power they didn't know about? Would you use that power, or would you let them keep underestimating you? Tomorrow, they'd get their answer. And I promise you, it wouldn't be the one they expected. Angela arrived at 7 in the morning with dark circles under her eyes and desperation in her voice. She didn't even knock, just walked into my kitchen like she owned the place, which was funny considering what I now knew about who really owned what in this family. Mama, we need to talk. She sat down hard at my table, her designer purse hitting the floor with a thud. Marcus didn't sleep all night. He's been making phone calls, talking to lawyers. I poured myself coffee slowly, deliberately. That's nice, dear. Want some breakfast? Don't play games with me. Her voice cracked. What did you mean yesterday about cleaning house? What business are you taking care of in Louisville? I buttered my toast and took a careful bite. Just some old paperwork James left behind. Nothing that concerns you. Everything you do concerns me. You're my mother. Funny how I became her mother again the moment she got scared. Yesterday I was just a jealous old woman. Today I was family worth worrying about. Angela, honey, you look tired. Maybe you should go home and rest. She leaned forward, her hands flat on my table. Mama, please. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you're going to do. What makes you think I'm going to do anything? Because Marcus's dad called him at midnight. Apparently their lawyer got a very interesting phone call yesterday. Something about the Mitchell estate and money that's been owed for 20 years. I smiled and sipped my coffee. Imagine that. Her face went white. How much money are we talking about? Oh, honey. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Angela stood up so fast her chair nearly fell over. This is about yesterday, isn't it? About what Tyler said, about what we said. Mama, we were wrong. We know that now. We were stressed and we took it out on you and that was horrible and we're sorry. Are you sorry? Or are you scared? The question hung between us like smoke from a fire. Angela's mouth opened and closed without making sound, her perfect makeup unable to hide the fear in her eyes. Both, she finally whispered. I remembered the night I found out James had been cheating on me early in our marriage. The way my world cracked open, the way I confronted him in this same kitchen. But he'd fought for us, begged for forgiveness, made love to me until I believed his promises again. He'd shown me that real love meant fighting for what mattered. Angela wasn't fighting for love. She was fighting for money. Mama, whatever Marcus's family owes, we can work something out. Maybe a payment plan, or... You think this is about money? Isn't it? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd watched their BMW drive away yesterday. Where I'd felt smaller and older than I had in years. This is about respect, Angela. This is about you calling me Tacky in my own home. This is about Tyler thinking I'm jealous of money I helped earn. This is about Marcus standing in my living room like he was afraid my poverty might rub off on him. We didn't mean. You meant every word. I turned to face her. You meant it when you said I raised you poor. You meant it when you said Marcus deserves better than this. I gestured around my kitchen. You meant it when you looked at me like I was something to be ashamed of. Angela's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. Mama, you're right. We were cruel and stupid and wrong. But please don't destroy our lives over it. Destroy your lives? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Baby, I'm about to give you the truth. Whether that destroys your life or saves it depends on what you do with it. My phone rang. Marcus's number. I answered on speakerphone. Hello, Marcus. Mrs. Mitchell. His voice was different now. Careful. Respectful. I think we need to talk. Oh, now you want to talk. Yesterday you could barely look at me. Yesterday I didn't understand the situation. And what situation is that? He was quiet for a long moment. The situation where my family owes your family a substantial amount of money. Angela gasped. She'd hoped I was bluffing. How substantial? I asked, though I already knew the answer would shock them both. According to our preliminary review, approximately $4.7 million. Angela dropped into her chair like she'd been shot. Her perfect world, her secure future, her husband's family fortune, all of it built on debt to the woman she'd called Tacky just yesterday. That's interesting, I said calmly. What do you plan to do about it? We need to discuss options. Options. I looked at Angela, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. What kind of options? Payment arrangements. Settlement negotiations. Ways to resolve this that work for everyone. Everyone. Like I was finally part of everyone again. Marcus, honey, let me ask you something. Yesterday when you were standing in my living room talking about how Angela deserves better than this, did you know your family owed mine almost $5 million? No, ma'am. Did you know that the contracts that built your family's reputation were paid for with my husband's money? No, ma'am. Did you know that when you called me Mrs. Mitchell like I was some stranger, you were talking to the woman who helped fund the business that's been paying for your fancy cars and expensive clothes? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. No, ma'am, he finally whispered. Angela was crying now, quiet sobs that shook her shoulders. Not tears of guilt, tears of fear. Fear that her comfortable life was about to disappear. Fear that the mama she'd dismissed was actually the most powerful person in the room. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady as stone. I'm driving to Louisville this morning. I'm meeting with your family's lawyer. We're going to discuss 20 years of unpaid debts and what that means for your family's future. Mrs. Mitchell, please. And Angela? You're coming with me. She looked up, mascara streaming down her cheeks. What? You want to be part of this conversation? You want to understand where your husband's money really comes from? Then you're going to sit in that lawyer's office and hear every word. Mama, I can't. You can and you will. Because yesterday you told me I raised you poor. Today you're going to learn exactly how rich I actually raised you to be. I hung up on Marcus and looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was beautiful, successful, married to a man who could give her everything she wanted. But she was also my child, and I'd failed her somewhere along the way. Failed to teach her that money without respect is just pretty paper. Failed to show her that power without kindness is just bullying with better clothes. Go home and change into something appropriate for a lawyer's office, I told her. We leave in 2 hours. Mama, what if this ruins everything? I walked over and cupped her face in my hands, the same way I did when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Baby girl, everything was already ruined the moment you forgot that I'm your mama, not your enemy. Today we're going to see if we can fix it. What would you do if you had to choose between your family's comfort and your own dignity? Would you protect the people who hurt you, or would you teach them that some lessons can only be learned the hard way? We were about to find out together. The drive to Louisville felt like traveling through time. Angela sat in my passenger seat, quiet as a church mouse, staring out the window at Kentucky farmland rolling past. She'd changed into a conservative black dress, the kind you wear to funerals or court hearings. Smart girl. Mama, she said when we were halfway there, how long have you known? Known what? About the money. About what Marcus's family owed Daddy. I kept my eyes on the road. Since the day he died. It was all in the safety deposit box, along with his instructions to wait for the right moment. 20 years. Her voice was hollow. You've known for 20 years that we were living off money that belonged to us. Money that belonged to your father. Money he earned through sweat and smart business decisions. Money that Marcus's family decided they didn't need to pay back because James was dead and I was just his widow. She was quiet for another 10 miles. Why didn't you tell me? Because James asked me not to. He said the Patterson family would come around eventually, do the right thing on their own. He believed people were basically good. But they didn't. No, they didn't. Instead, they got richer while we got poorer. They built their reputation on work James paid for, then acted like we didn't exist. Angela touched the window, her breath fogging the glass. And I married into that family without knowing any of it. You married Marcus because you loved him. At least, I hope you did. I did. I do. She turned to face me. But Mama, if this comes out, if everyone finds out that the Patterson fortune is built on unpaid debts. What? You'll be embarrassed? Your friends will whisper about you at country club lunches? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I took the Louisville exit, city skyline rising in front of us. You married a man whose family stole from yours, then you looked down on me for being poor while they lived off money that should have been supporting you your whole life. The law office was downtown, glass and steel reaching toward heaven like it was trying to escape the sins committed inside. Angela gripped her purse tighter as we walked through the marble lobby. Mrs. Mitchell? A young woman in an expensive suit approached us. I'm Jennifer. Mr. Patterson is ready for you. The conference room was all mahogany and intimidation, the kind of room designed to make regular people feel small. But I wasn't regular people today. Today I was James Mitchell's widow, armed with truth and ready for battle. Mr. Patterson was older than I expected, with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of dirty deals. 2 younger lawyers flanked him, both taking notes before anyone had said a word. Mrs. Mitchell. Thank you for coming. He stood when we entered. And this must be my daughter, Angela Patterson. I smiled sweetly. Marcus's wife. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. He hadn't expected Angela to be here. He'd probably hoped to handle the old lady quietly, away from family members who might ask uncomfortable questions. Please, sit down. His voice was carefully controlled. I've reviewed the documents you referenced, and I must say, they're quite comprehensive. I opened James's briefcase and placed copies of everything on the table. 20 years of proof spread out like a poker player's winning hand. Mr. Patterson, let's be clear about what we're discussing here. Your clients owe my family $4.7 million in principal and interest. Money that was loaned in good faith and never repaid. Angela stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Numbers, signatures, dates, all proof that her comfortable life was built on stolen ground. Now, Mrs. Mitchell, I think stolen is a strong word. What would you call it when someone borrows money and never pays it back? One of the younger lawyers whispered something to Patterson. He nodded and leaned forward. There may have been some oversights in our bookkeeping over the years. But I'm sure we can reach an arrangement that satisfies everyone. An arrangement. I looked at Angela, who was reading a contract with her mouth hanging open. What kind of arrangement did you have in mind? Well, given the age of these agreements and the complexity of the situation, perhaps we could settle for a reduced amount. Say, $500,000? $500,000. Like that was generous for nearly $5 million they'd stolen from us. Angela finally found her voice. This contract shows that Grandpa Patterson borrowed money to buy the equipment that built their business. The excavators, the trucks, all of it. That's correct, I said, watching Mr. Patterson squirm. And this partnership agreement shows that Daddy provided materials and labor for the Louisville Riverfront project. The project that made them famous. Also correct. She looked up at me with wonder in her eyes, like she was seeing me for the first time. Mama, they built their whole company on money they borrowed from Daddy and never paid back. Now you're getting it. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, surely we can discuss this reasonably. We are discussing it reasonably. You owe us money. We want it back. Plus interest. Plus damages for 20 years of watching your family live in luxury while mine struggled to pay bills. Angela stood up so suddenly her chair rolled back. I need some air. She walked to the window overlooking downtown Louisville, her shoulders shaking. I knew what she was thinking. Every nice thing Marcus had ever bought her. Every expensive dinner, every designer dress, every first-class vacation. All of it paid for with money that should have been hers by right. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Patterson said carefully, perhaps you could help us understand your mother's expectations. Angela turned around, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen since she was little. Righteous anger. The kind that runs in families. My expectations? Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. My expectation is that you pay back every penny you stole from my family. My expectation is that you stop pretending this is some kind of misunderstanding. My expectation is that you treat my mama with the respect she deserves. The lawyers exchanged glances. They'd lost control of the room, and they knew it. What my daughter said, I added calmly. But let's be specific. $4.7 million. Full payment within 30 days. Or we take this to court and let a jury decide how much extra you owe for fraud and emotional distress. Mr. Patterson's hands shook as he reached for his water glass. Mrs. Mitchell, that amount would seriously impact the Patterson family businesses. Good, Angela said before I could respond. Maybe they should have thought of that before they decided stealing from widows was a good business strategy. I reached over and squeezed my daughter's hand. For the first time in years, we were on the same side. What would you do if you discovered your in-laws had stolen millions from your family and then looked down on you for being poor? Would you demand justice or try to keep the peace? Angela had made her choice. And watching her stand up for me in that room full of suits and lies, I was prouder of her than I'd been since the day she was born. Mr. Patterson excused himself to make a phone call, leaving us alone in the conference room with his two nervous junior lawyers. Through the glass walls, I could see him pacing in his office, phone pressed to his ear, probably explaining to Marcus's father that their worst nightmare had just walked through the door. Angela moved her chair closer to mine. Mama, I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that. I know. She touched one of the contracts, tracing her finger over James's signature. I remembered Daddy working late in the garage, always on the phone with contractors and suppliers. I thought he was just small time. Your father was never small-time, baby. He was just quiet about his success. And I married into the family that stole from him. She shook her head. God, Mama, what does that make me? It makes you my daughter. And it makes you someone who gets to choose what happens next. Through the glass, Mr. Patterson was gesturing wildly, his voice getting louder even though we couldn't make out the words. The junior lawyers kept glancing at us like we were bombs that might go off any second. My phone rang. Marcus. I answered on speaker so Angela could hear. Hello, Marcus. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm in the car heading to the office. My father, he's very upset. I imagine he is. He wants to know if there's any way we can resolve this quietly. Family to family. Angela leaned toward the phone. Marcus, it's me. Did you know? Any of it? Angel? His voice cracked when he heard her. Baby, I swear to God, I had no idea. Nobody told me about any old debts or partnerships. I thought my grandfather built the business from scratch. Well, he didn't. Her voice was hard as nails. He built it with money he borrowed from my father and never paid back. Angel, please. You have to believe me. I never would have let my family treat your mother badly if I'd known. But you did let them treat her badly. You stood in her living room yesterday acting like her poverty was contagious. The silence on the other end was deafening. You're right, he finally whispered. I was wrong. I was raised to think money meant worth, and I should have known better. Especially married to you. I had to give him credit for that. Marcus, I said, where are you right now? About 10 minutes from the law office. My father wants me there when we discuss terms. Good. Because we need to discuss more than terms. We need to discuss respect. Yes, ma'am. We need to discuss how your family has been living off my husband's work for 20 years while treating his widow like a charity case. Yes, ma'am. And we need to discuss what kind of man you're going to choose to be now that you know the truth. Angela was watching me with something like awe. This was the mama she remembered from childhood, the one who fought for her family, the one who didn't back down when principle was on the line. Mrs. Mitchell, Marcus said, I know I don't deserve to ask for anything, but please don't let this destroy my marriage to Angela. I love her. I know I've been an ass, but I love her. That's not up to me, son. That's up to her. Angela looked at the phone, then at me, then at all the documents spread across the table. Evidence of 20 years of lies and theft. Evidence that her husband's family had built their fortune on her father's grave. But also evidence that she came from stronger stock than anyone had given her credit for. Marcus, she said, I love you too. But everything changes now. Everything. I know. No more looking down on Mama. No more acting like we're better than anyone else. No more pretending your family earned what they have. I understand. And we pay back every penny. Even if it means selling everything we own. Through the glass, I saw Mr. Patterson end his call and start walking back toward us. His face was grim, like a doctor delivering bad news. Marcus, your lawyer's coming back, I said. Time to see what kind of man your father raised. Mr. Patterson entered the room with a folder full of fresh documents. Behind him walked a man I recognized from newspaper photos, Marcus's father, Robert Patterson. Older, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He looked at me for a long moment, then extended his hand. Mrs. Mitchell. I'm Robert Patterson. I believe we need to talk. I didn't shake his hand. We've needed to talk for 20 years, Mr. Patterson. What made you decide now was the right time? He sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 70-something years. Because my son just told me that you're not the woman I thought you were. And who did you think I was? I thought you were James Mitchell's widow. A woman who probably didn't understand business, who wouldn't know how to read contracts or calculate interest. He gestured at the documents. I was wrong. Yes, you were. Angela leaned forward. Mr. Patterson, I'm Angela. Marcus's wife. And I want to know why you never mentioned that your family owed mine money. He looked at her with something like shame. Because I hoped you'd never find out. Because I was afraid if Marcus knew the truth, he might feel obligated to choose sides. Choose sides? Angela's voice rose. This isn't about sides. This is about right and wrong. Robert Patterson nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. And we've been wrong for 20 years. The room went quiet except for the sound of traffic 20 floors below. This was the moment everything changed. The moment Marcus's family decided whether they were going to keep lying or start telling the truth. So, I said, what are we going to do about it? Have you ever been in a room where everyone's future hung on the next word spoken? Where 20 years of lies were about to either continue or finally end? That's where we were. And I promise you, what happened next was going to surprise everyone, including me. The drive back from Louisville should have felt like victory, but instead it felt like the morning after a storm. Everything changed, nothing quite settled yet. Angela sat beside me, both of us quiet, both of us trying to process what had just happened in that conference room. We'd won. Robert Patterson had agreed to full repayment, $4.7 million transferred to my account within 60 days. Marcus had called 3 times during the meeting, apologizing, promising to make things right, begging Angela to forgive him. But victory felt heavier than I'd expected. Mama, Angela said as we passed the Kentucky state line, what happens now? Now you and Marcus decide if your marriage can survive the truth. She was quiet for another few miles, watching Ohio farmland roll past like she was seeing it for the first time. He really didn't know. I could hear it in his voice. I believe that. But he should have known something. All those years of his family having money while mine struggled, he should have asked questions. Should have, would have, could have. Those are dangerous words, baby. They'll eat you alive if you let them. She turned to look at me. How are you not angrier? They stole from us for 20 years. They made you live in poverty while they got rich off Daddy's work. I thought about that while I drove. How was I not angrier? I'd been furious yesterday, ready to burn down everything in my path. But sitting in that conference room, watching grown men squirm and lie and finally admit the truth, I'd felt something else. Relief. I think I was angry for so long that I forgot what it felt like, I finally said. But today, watching you stand up for me in that room, watching you choose what's right over what's easy, that felt better than anger. Angela's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry I called you tacky. I'm sorry I made you feel small. I'm sorry I forgot that you're the strongest woman I know. You didn't forget, baby. You just got distracted by shiny things. My phone rang. Marcus again. Answer it, I told Angela. Marcus? Angel, thank God. Are you okay? Are you and your mom okay? We're fine. We're driving home. I've been thinking about everything, about what this means for us. I know I have a lot to make up for. I know I hurt you both. Angela looked at me, seeking guidance. I nodded. Marcus, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money. This is about respect. This is about how you treated my mama yesterday like she was beneath you. I know. God, Angel, I know. I was raised wrong. My whole family was raised wrong. We thought having money made us better than other people. And now you know where that money came from. Now I know we've been living a lie. I could hear the pain in his voice, and despite everything, I felt sorry for him. Finding out your whole life is built on stolen ground has to be devastating. What are you going to do about it? Angela asked. Whatever it takes to make this right. Whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness and your mom's respect. We were pulling into my driveway now, my little house looking exactly the same as when we'd left it this morning. But everything was different. The woman who'd lived here yesterday was just James Mitchell's poor widow. The woman who lived here now was James Mitchell's wealthy widow who'd just reclaimed her family's stolen legacy. Angela, I said, you need to decide if you can forgive him. Not today, not this week, but eventually. Because marriage is hard enough without carrying 20 years of your in-laws' sins. She nodded, still holding the phone. Marcus, I need time to think. About us, about everything. I understand. Take all the time you need. But Marcus? If we're going to make this work, things have to change. Really change. No more looking down on people. No more acting like money makes you special. No more forgetting that my mama raised me to be strong, not grateful. Yes, ma'am. Whatever it takes. After she hung up, we sat in my car for a moment, looking at my house where this all started. Where Angela had called me tacky less than 24 hours ago. Where I'd decided to stop being invisible. Mama, what are you going to do with the money? I thought about that. $4.7 million was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. More than enough to buy a mansion, travel the world, live like the wealthy widow I'd always had the right to be. I'm going to pay off your student loans, I said. And Tyler's college fund. And then I'm going to do something your daddy would be proud of. What's that? I'm going to help other widows who got cheated out of what their husbands left them. I'm going to make sure no other woman has to wait 20 years for justice. Angela reached over and hugged me, really hugged me, for the first time in months. Daddy would be proud of that. He'd be proud of you. He'd be proud of you too, baby. For standing up to those lawyers, for choosing right over easy. We got out of the car and walked to my front door together. Angela stopped on the porch. Mama, can I ask you something? Anything. Yesterday, when we were here being awful to you, did you know then that you were going to take them down? I thought about James's hands on my body all those years ago, the way he'd whisper promises against my skin about protecting our family's future. The way he'd made love to me like I was precious, like I was worth fighting for. I knew I wasn't going to be invisible anymore, I said. Everything else just followed from that. What would you do if you suddenly went from struggling to wealthy because you finally stood up for what was right? Would you use that money for revenge or for healing? I was about to find out. And I had a feeling James, wherever he was going to love watching me figure it out. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and a bank statement that proved everything had changed. The Patterson family's lawyer had wired a good faith payment of $500,000 within hours of our meeting. The rest would follow within 60 days, but seeing those numbers in my account made everything real. I wasn't poor anymore. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't invisible anymore. But more than that, I wasn't angry anymore either. The phone had been ringing all evening. Angela calling to check on me. Marcus calling to apologize again. Even Tyler had called, confused about why his mom was crying happy tears and his dad was suddenly very interested in family history. But the call that mattered most came at 9 o'clock. Mrs. Mitchell? This is Jennifer from the law office. Mr. Patterson asked me to call you directly. What can I do for you, Jennifer? Well, ma'am, it's more about what you've done for me. And for a lot of other people. I set down my teacup. I don't understand. Mr. Patterson has been my boss for 5 years. In all that time, I've never seen him admit he was wrong about anything. But today, after you left, he called a staff meeting. He told us about the Mitchell estate, about the money his family owed yours. That must have been awkward. Jennifer laughed. Mrs. Mitchell, it was beautiful. He stood up in front of 20 lawyers and said, "We've been wrong for 20 years, and it took a brave woman to make us face the truth." Then he asked us to review all our old cases, see if there were any other families who got cheated the way yours did. My heart skipped. And? We found 12 cases. 12 families who were owed money or property that somehow got forgotten over the years. Mr. Patterson wants to make all of them right. I had to sit down. 12 families? Yes, ma'am. And he said to tell you that you didn't just get justice for your family today. You got justice for people you've never even met. After Jennifer hung up, I walked to my bedroom and looked at James's photograph on the dresser. His gentle eyes seemed to be smiling, like he knew something I was just figuring out. I touched the glass over his face. You knew, didn't you? You knew that getting justice for us would mean getting justice for everyone. The photo didn't answer, but I could almost hear his voice, the way he used to whisper in my ear during our most intimate moments. Dorothy, baby, you're stronger than you know. You're more powerful than you believe. And when the time comes, you're going to change everything. I thought he was just talking about our love, our life together. But he'd been talking about something bigger. Something that would outlast both of us. My phone buzzed. A text from Angela. Mama, Marcus's dad wants to meet with you tomorrow. Says he has a proposition. Should I be worried? I smiled and texted back, no, baby. I think he's finally ready to do the right thing. But as I got ready for bed, I realized something that made my hands shake as I brushed my teeth. This wasn't over. Getting the money back was just the beginning. James had left me more than documents in that safety deposit box. He'd left me a mission. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. How many other widows were out there, living in poverty while the families who owed their husbands money lived in luxury? How many other women had been dismissed as powerless when they were actually holding the keys to justice? By midnight, I'd filled 3 pages with notes. Names of law firms, construction companies, real estate developers. All businesses that had grown large by borrowing money from small contractors like James and then forgetting to pay it back. Tomorrow, Robert Patterson wanted to make me a proposition. But I was going to make him one instead. I was going to propose that we change everything. I went to bed that night for the first time in 20 years feeling like the woman James had fallen in love with. Powerful. Determined. Ready to fight for what was right. But I also went to bed feeling something else, something I hadn't felt since James died. I felt alive. Truly, completely alive. In my dreams, I was young again, and James was making love to me with passion that promised tomorrow would be everything we wanted it to be. His hands were sure on my body, his voice whispering promises about changing the world together. When I woke up, I realized he hadn't been lying. We were going to change the world. We just needed 20 years to figure out how. What would you do if you discovered that your personal fight for justice could help dozens of other families get what they deserved? Would you stop at getting what was yours, or would you keep fighting for everyone else? I already knew my answer. And I had a feeling Robert Patterson was about to learn what real power looked like when it decided to fight for more than just itself. Good for everyone who got cheated. Robert Patterson studied me like he was seeing me for the first time. You want to help other families? I want to make sure no other widow spends 20 years thinking she's poor while the people who owe her money get rich. He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. What if I told you I could make you a partner in this? What if instead of just settling your family's debt, we created something bigger? I leaned back in my chair, suspicious. What kind of something bigger? A foundation. A legal fund that helps families recover debts like yours. We use part of what we owe you as seed money, and I contribute my firm's services. Why would you do that? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his coffee cup like it held answers. Because my son called me at 6 this morning. He was crying, Mrs. Mitchell. A 35-year-old man, crying because he finally understood what kind of family he married into. And what kind is that? The kind that takes what isn't theirs and calls it good business. My phone buzzed. A text from Angela. Mama, Marcus can't stop apologizing. Says his whole family is ashamed. Is that true? I showed Robert the text. Your family feeling ashamed now? We should have been ashamed 20 years ago. He pulled out a folder. Mrs. Mitchell, we found 11 other cases like yours. Families we owed money to who never got paid. Most of the widows are still alive. 11 other families. 11 other women who'd been dismissed as powerless while the Patterson empire grew fat on their husbands' work. How much do you owe them? Total? Including interest? He swallowed hard. Somewhere around $12 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. 12 million? Your case opened the floodgates. My junior partner spent all night going through old files. We found patterns, Mrs. Mitchell. Patterns of borrowing money from small contractors and then forgetting about it when they died. That's not forgetting. That's stealing. Yes, it is. He met my eyes directly. And I want to make it right. All of it. I walked to my window and looked out at the street where I'd lived quietly for 20 years. Where I'd accepted being small because I thought small was all I deserved. What would this foundation do exactly? Help families like yours navigate the legal system. Provide free legal services to recover debts. Go after companies that think they can cheat widows and get away with it. And you'd fund this with money you stole from us in the first place. Yes, ma'am. Blood money put to good use. I turned back to face him. What do you get out of it? Maybe some sleep at night. Maybe my son's respect back. Maybe the chance to do something right before I die. My phone rang. Tyler's number. Grandma? Mom's crying but she won't tell me why. She just keeps saying she's proud of you. I'll call her later, baby. Grandma, did you really make Dad's family pay back money they owed Grandpa? Yes, Tyler, I did. That's so cool. You're like a superhero or something. A superhero. My 16-year-old grandson thought I was a superhero. Yesterday he thought I was jealous of his family's money. After I hung up, Robert was watching me with something that might have been respect. Your grandson sounds proud of you. He should be. His grandpa was an honorable man who deserved better than what your family gave him. Yes, he did. Robert closed his folder. Mrs. Mitchell, I can't undo 20 years of wrong. But I can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. I thought about James, about the promises he'd whispered against my skin in our darkest moments. How he'd sworn that someday everyone would know what kind of woman he'd married. Maybe someday had finally come. I want to see the other cases, I said. I want to meet the other families. I'll arrange it. And I want full financial transparency. If we're doing this, I want to know where every dollar goes. Of course. And Robert? Yes, ma'am. If I find out you're trying to cheat me the way your family cheated my husband, I'll destroy everything you've built. Do we understand each other? He nodded slowly. We understand each other perfectly. What would you do if the chance for justice suddenly became the chance to help dozens of other people? Would you take the money and walk away, or would you fight for everyone who'd been cheated? I already knew my answer. James had taught me that love isn't just about protecting your own family. Sometimes it's about protecting families you've never met. The next morning, Robert's office looked like a war zone. File boxes covered every surface, legal documents scattered across conference tables like evidence at a crime scene. 11 families. 11 sets of documents proving the Patterson empire was built on theft. Jennifer, the young lawyer who'd called me, was organizing everything with the precision of a general planning battle. Mrs. Mitchell, let me introduce you to what we've found. She handed me a folder. The Henderson family. Mr. Henderson provided concrete for 3 major shopping centers in 1987. Never got paid for the last 2 jobs. The Patterson family claimed the work was substandard. I opened the folder and found photographs. Before and after shots of the construction sites. The concrete work looked perfect to me. How much did they owe? $800,000. With interest, it's now $2.1 million. Is Mrs. Henderson still alive? Yes. She's 78, living in a nursing home in Lexington. Her family thinks she's broke. My hands shook as I closed the folder. Another woman, spending her final years thinking she was poor while the Patterson family lived in luxury with her husband's money. Show me the next one. Jennifer handed me another folder. The Washington family. Mr. Washington provided electrical work for the Patterson office building downtown. The one where we're sitting right now. I looked around the expensive office space, thinking about how many families had paid for these mahogany desks and leather chairs without knowing it. Mr. Washington died in 1995. His wife remarried and moved to Florida. She has no idea the Patterson family still owes her late husband's estate $400,000. That's now worth $900,000. Folder after folder, Jennifer showed me the evidence. The Martinez family. The Thompson family. The Johnsons. All small contractors who'd worked for the Pattersons. All dead now. All survived by widows who'd been struggling while the people who owed them money got richer. Jennifer, I said after reviewing the sixth case, how is this legal? How can a company just decide not to pay people? Technically, it's not legal. But when the contractor dies and the widow doesn't know her rights, or can't afford a lawyer, or is too intimidated by big law firms. She shrugged. They get away with it. Until now. Until now. Robert walked in carrying coffee and looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Mrs. Mitchell, I owe you an apology beyond anything I said yesterday. What now? We found 3 more cases. Families we didn't even remember we owed money to. He sat down heavily. The total is now 15 families. 16 including yours. How much total? $18 million. The room went silent except for the sound of traffic 20 floors below. $18 million stolen from families who trusted the Patterson name. $18 million that should have been supporting widows and children instead of funding country club memberships and luxury cars. There's more, Robert continued. Some of these debts go back to my father's generation. We've been doing this for 40 years. Jennifer looked up from her files. Mr. Patterson, we also found something else. 3 of these contractors filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau. The complaints were withdrawn after they died. Withdrawn by who? Their widows. All 3 women withdrew the complaints within months of their husbands' deaths. I felt sick. You pressured grieving widows into dropping complaints against you? Robert's face went gray. I don't remember the specifics, but, yes. That's what we did. We made them feel like fighting us was hopeless. My phone buzzed. Angela texting, Mama, Marcus says his family wants to meet with you again. He's scared about something. Should I be worried? I showed Jennifer the text. What should she be worried about? Jennifer exchanged glances with Robert. Mrs. Mitchell, if word of this gets out before we can handle it properly. What? The Patterson Construction Company could face criminal charges. Fraud, theft, racketeering. This isn't just civil debt anymore. This is a pattern of criminal behavior spanning decades. Robert loosened his tie like it was choking him. My son could go to prison. My grandchildren could grow up visiting their father behind bars. Your son didn't know about any of this? Marcus knew we were successful. He didn't know we were thieves. I thought about Angela, about Tyler, about the innocent family members who'd been living off stolen money without knowing it. Then I thought about Mrs. Henderson in her nursing home, about all the other widows who died poor while their families' money paid for Patterson family vacations. Jennifer, what happens if we don't pursue criminal charges? We focus on civil recovery. Get the money back to the families. The Pattersons face financial consequences but not prison time. And if we do pursue charges? Justice gets served, but it takes years longer and the families might never see their money. Robert looked at me with desperate eyes. Mrs. Mitchell, I know I have no right to ask for mercy. But there are innocent people in my family. People who had nothing to do with this. There were innocent people in our families too. They just didn't have lawyers and money to protect them. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. 40 years of theft. 16 families cheated out of their legacy. Millions of dollars stolen from people who couldn't fight back. But also innocent grandchildren who didn't deserve to pay for their family's crimes. I need to think about this, I said. I need to talk to the other families first. Of course. We're arranging meetings with all of them. And Robert? Yes, ma'am. If I decide to show mercy, it won't be for you. It'll be for the people you love who didn't choose to be part of this. What would you do if you had the power to destroy your enemies but it would hurt innocent people too? How do you balance justice with mercy when both are needed? I was about to find out if wisdom comes with age, or if some choices are just too hard for anyone to make. Mrs. Henderson's nursing home smelled like disinfectant and forgotten dreams. She sat in a wheelchair by the window, staring out at a parking lot like she was watching for someone who would never come. When I introduced myself and mentioned the Patterson family, her eyes sharpened like she'd been waiting 70 years for this conversation. Dorothy Mitchell, she repeated, studying my face. You look familiar. My husband James worked construction too. Maybe our paths crossed somewhere. James Mitchell. Her voice got stronger. Tall man, gentle hands, always talked about his beautiful wife. My heart skipped. You knew James? Honey, every contractor in Kentucky knew James Mitchell. He was honest in a business full of thieves. She reached over and squeezed my hand with surprising strength. I heard about the Patterson debt. Word travels fast in our community. Mrs. Henderson, how long have you known they owed your husband money? Her laugh was bitter as old coffee. 40 years, sweetheart. I've known for 40 years. Why didn't you ever fight them? She gestured around the nursing home's common area, at the worn furniture and fluorescent lights. With what money? With what lawyers? They told me if I pushed too hard, they'd sue me for harassment and I'd lose everything. So you just gave up. I survived. I raised my children. I worked 2 jobs until I was 75. She looked back out the window. But I never forgot, and I never forgave. My phone rang. Angela's number. Mama, where are you? Marcus is at the house looking for you. He's really upset about something. I'm in Lexington. I'll be home tonight. Mama, he's talking about his family having to sell everything. He's talking about bankruptcy and prison time. What's going on? I looked at Mrs. Henderson, who was listening to every word. Angela, I'll explain everything when I get home. After I hung up, Mrs. Henderson smiled at me. Your daughter sounds worried. Her husband's family owes a lot of people money. Including us. And now she's caught in the middle. Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a moment, still staring out that window. Dorothy, can I tell you something? Of course. When my husband died, I was so angry I could have burned down everything the Pattersons owned. I wanted them to hurt the way they hurt us. What stopped you? Time. And realizing that hate is just love with nowhere to go. She turned to face me fully. I loved my husband. I loved our children. I loved the life we built together. Spending my remaining years fighting people who weren't worth my energy seemed like a waste of the love I had left. So you let them get away with it. I chose peace over revenge. But Dorothy, that was my choice to make. Not theirs. I drove home from Lexington with Mrs. Henderson's words echoing in my head. By the time I pulled into my driveway, 3 cars were waiting. Angela's BMW, Marcus's truck, and a car I didn't recognize. Angela met me at the door, her eyes red from crying. Mama, we need to talk. All of us. In my living room, Marcus sat beside a man who looked like an older, more desperate version of him. Robert Patterson's brother, apparently, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. Mrs. Mitchell, Marcus stood when I entered. This is my Uncle David. He has something to tell you. David Patterson looked like he was about to throw up. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been hearing about what my family owes yours. What we owe all these families. And? I've been the company accountant for 30 years. I know where every dollar came from and where it went. His hands shook as he pulled out a folder. I have proof that my brother Robert knew exactly what we were doing. That this wasn't just oversight or poor record-keeping. Marcus's face went white. Uncle David, what are you saying? I'm saying your father and grandfather deliberately chose not to pay these debts. They had meetings about it. They made conscious decisions to keep money that wasn't theirs. Angela sank onto my sofa like her legs had given out. You're talking about fraud. I'm talking about organized theft spanning 40 years. David pulled out a tape recorder, the old-fashioned kind people used in offices before computers. This is from a board meeting in 1987. Listen. He pressed play. Robert Patterson's voice, younger but unmistakably his, filled my living room. The Henderson account is past due, but he's not going to sue us. His wife is too scared, and they don't have lawyer money. We keep the $400,000. Another voice, probably David's father, what about the Mitchell account? Same thing. His widow won't know what to do with the contracts. We keep quiet until she gives up. Angela gasped. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. I sat down hard in my chair, listening to my husband's reputation being discussed like he was nothing more than an obstacle to their profit. Turn it off, I said quietly. David clicked off the recorder. Mrs. Mitchell, there are 12 hours of recordings like this. Meetings where they planned which debts to ignore, which widows to intimidate, which families to steal from. Why are you showing me this? Because I can't live with it anymore. Because my nephew married your daughter and I don't want their children growing up with blood money. He looked at Marcus with something like pity. And because if you don't destroy my brother, I will. The room went silent except for the sound of everyone breathing too hard. Angela finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Mama, what are you going to do? I looked around my living room at the evidence of 40 years of deliberate theft. At my daughter's tear-stained face. At Marcus's desperate eyes. At David Patterson, who'd finally found the courage to tell the truth. I'm going to call the other families, I said. And then we're going to decide together. Decide what? Marcus asked. I met his eyes directly. Whether your family deserves mercy or justice. What would you do if you discovered the theft wasn't just neglect but planned, deliberate crime? Would mercy still be possible, or would justice be the only acceptable response? The choice was no longer just mine to make. And I had a feeling that was exactly how it should be. The Henderson family living room was packed with people I'd never met but somehow knew by heart. 15 widows, ranging from 65 to 92. Some with grown children, some with grandchildren, all carrying 40 years of quiet anger and dignity worn thin by struggle. Mrs. Washington sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying. Mrs. Mitchell, I want to thank you for bringing us all together. I just opened the door. You all decided to walk through it. Some doors need to be opened from the outside, said Mrs. Martinez, the youngest of us at 65. I've been working as a store clerk for 20 years because I thought my husband left us with nothing. Now I find out he left us everything, but it was stolen. Jennifer sat at the dining room table with her laptop and legal pads, taking notes as we talked. David Patterson's recordings were stacked beside her like evidence at a trial. Ladies, Jennifer said, I want you to understand your options clearly. We can pursue civil recovery, get your money back, plus interest. That would take about a year and you'd all be financially secure. What's the other option? Asked Mrs. Johnson, her voice sharp as broken glass. Criminal charges. Fraud, racketeering, theft. The Patterson family could face prison time, but the legal process would take 3 to 5 years, and there's no guarantee you'd recover your money. Mrs. Thompson, the oldest among us at 92, spoke up from her wheelchair. Jennifer, dear, how many other companies are doing what the Pattersons did? Ma'am? How many other families are sitting at home right now, thinking they're poor when they're actually rich? How many other companies are stealing from widows because they think they can get away with it? Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Based on our preliminary research? Probably hundreds. The room erupted. 15 voices, all talking at once, all saying variations of the same thing. This has to stop. Ladies, Mrs. Henderson called from her wheelchair. Let's think about this clearly. The room quieted out of respect for our eldest member. I've been thinking about this for 40 years, Mrs. Henderson continued. And I've decided something. I don't want just my money back. I want every company in Kentucky to know that cheating widows comes with consequences. Even if it takes 5 years? Jennifer asked. Honey, I'm 78 years old. I might not live to see the end of this fight. But maybe my great-granddaughter will grow up in a world where stealing from grieving women isn't considered good business. Mrs. Martinez leaned forward. What about the innocent family members? Marcus seems like a good man. His children don't deserve to suffer for their grandfather's crimes. Did our children deserve to suffer for crimes they didn't commit either? Mrs. Washington shot back. I raised 4 kids thinking we were poor. They went without things they shouldn't have had to go without. My phone buzzed. A text from Angela. Mama, Marcus's family is having an emergency meeting. His uncle David told them about the recordings. Everyone's panicking. Please call me. I showed the text to the group. The Patterson family is scared. Good, said Mrs. Thompson. They should have been scared 40 years ago. Mrs. Mitchell, Jennifer said, there's something else you need to know. If we pursue criminal charges, the media will get involved. This story will be front-page news across Kentucky. Every detail of your lives will be public. Including the fact that we were cheated? Mrs. Martinez asked. Including everything. Your financial struggles, your family situations, your husband's business relationships. Privacy won't be an option. I thought about Tyler, about having to explain to my grandson why his grandmother was on the news talking about his father's family being thieves. I thought about Angela, about the social embarrassment she'd face when her country club friends learned the truth. But I also thought about Mrs. Henderson, spending 40 years in poverty while the people who stole from her lived in luxury. I thought about all the other families we didn't even know about yet, still sitting at home thinking they were poor when they were actually victims. Ladies, I said, I want to tell you about a conversation I had with my husband the night before he died. The room went completely quiet. James was in the hospital, barely conscious. But he squeezed my hand and whispered something I didn't understand until this week. I paused, remembering his gentle eyes fighting to stay open. He said, Dorothy, baby, you're stronger than you know. Someday you're going to have to choose between what's easy and what's right. Choose right, even if it costs you everything. Mrs. Henderson reached over and took my hand. What do you think he'd want you to do? I think he'd want me to make sure no other woman has to wait 40 years for justice. One by one, around that room, 15 widows made the same decision. We would pursue criminal charges. We would make this public. We would make sure every company in Kentucky knew that stealing from families comes with real consequences. Even if it took 5 years. Even if we faced media scrutiny. Even if some of us didn't live to see the final outcome. Jennifer, Mrs. Henderson said, make the calls. File the charges. It's time the Patterson family learned what justice feels like. As we left Mrs. Henderson's house, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not vindication, but peace. The deep, settled peace that comes from knowing you chose the harder right over the easier wrong. My phone rang as I got in my car. Angela's number. Mama, please tell me you're not going to destroy Marcus's family. Baby, I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. But the lawyers say there could be prison time. Marcus could lose everything. Marcus won't lose anything that actually belonged to him. The silence on the other end told me she was finally beginning to understand. What would you choose, getting your money back quietly, or fighting a public battle that might help hundreds of other families but could take years and hurt innocent people too? We'd chosen justice over comfort. And I had a feeling James, wherever he was finally proud of the woman he'd married. 6 months later, I stood on the courthouse steps in Louisville wearing the same blue dress I'd worn to our first meeting with the Patterson lawyers. But this time, Angela stood beside me, holding Tyler's hand while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. The headlines had been devastating for the Patterson family: Kentucky construction empire built on stolen money. Widow's lawsuit exposes decades of fraud. Patterson construction, from prosperity to prison. But they'd been liberating for us. Tyler squeezed my hand as the prosecutor read the verdict. "Grandma, are you okay?" "I'm perfect, baby." Robert Patterson stood at the defendant's table looking 20 years older than when I'd first met him in that conference room. His brother David sat with the prosecution, having turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity. Marcus wasn't in the courtroom. He was at home with divorce papers that had arrived that morning. On the charge of organized fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Angela closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. On the charge of theft by deception, we find the defendant guilty. Mrs. Henderson sat in her wheelchair in the front row, tears streaming down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, tears of vindication 40 years in the making. On the charge of racketeering, we find the defendant guilty. The judge's gavel fell like thunder. "Mr. Patterson, you are hereby sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole in 4 years. You are further ordered to pay full restitution to the affected families, plus punitive damages in the amount of $5 million. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed toward us, but I was focused on something else. In the back of the courtroom, Marcus sat alone, his face buried in his hands. Angela saw him too. "Mama, I need to go," I said. "He's still Tyler's father." She walked back to where Marcus sat, not to comfort him but to place a folder in his hands. The divorce papers she'd filed 3 months ago, when she finally understood that she couldn't stay married to someone whose family had built their fortune on her father's grave. Marcus looked up at her with desperate eyes. "Angel, please. I'm not them. I didn't know." "I know you didn't know," she said quietly. "But you benefited from it. We all did. And I can't build Tyler's future on money stolen from his great-grandfather's legacy." Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaos. News vans, protesters holding signs reading, "Justice for Widows," and supporters who'd driven from across Kentucky to witness what one newspaper called the trial of the decade. Mrs. Washington found me in the crowd. "Dorothy, how does it feel?" "It feels like James can finally rest." Jennifer appeared beside us, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have news. 3 more construction companies have voluntarily come forward to settle old debts. They don't want to be the next Patterson Construction." "How many families?" 27 so far. With more coming every day. Tyler tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, that reporter wants to interview you." The reporter was young, professional, the kind who'd made this story her mission for the past 6 months. "Mrs. Mitchell, what would you say to other widows who might be in similar situations?" I thought about all the women still sitting at home, thinking they were poor when they were actually victims. "I'd say your husband's death doesn't erase the debts people owe him. I'd say being a widow doesn't make you powerless. And I'd say it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve." Any final words for the Patterson family? I looked back at the courthouse where Robert Patterson was being led away in handcuffs, where Marcus was walking to his car alone, where 40 years of lies had finally been exposed to sunlight. I hope they use this time to teach their children the difference between earning money and stealing it. That evening, we gathered at my house, the same kitchen where this all started 6 months ago. Angela, Tyler, Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Washington, and half a dozen other families. The dining room table was covered with settlement checks, restitution payments, and legal documents that proved justice wasn't just a word in law books. "Grandma," Tyler said, Mom told me you're giving away most of the money. Not giving away. Investing. In what? I smiled and pointed to the papers on the table. In making sure no other family has to fight alone. The Dorothy Mitchell Foundation for Widow Justice had been Angela's idea. Use our settlement money to provide free legal services for families trying to recover debts from their deceased husband's business partners. Turn our personal victory into systematic change. Mrs. Mitchell, Mrs. Henderson said from her wheelchair, I have something for you. She handed me an envelope, yellowed with age. This is a letter your husband wrote to my husband in 1985. I found it in George's papers after he died. My hands shook as I opened it. James's careful handwriting filled the page. George, I know times are tough for small contractors like us. But I believe if we stick together, look out for each other's families, we can build something that lasts longer than any building. If anything happens to me, I trust you'll make sure Dorothy is taken care of. And if anything happens to you, I promise the same for Helen. I had to sit down. Even in death, James had been looking out for other families. Even knowing he might not be around to protect me, he'd been building a network of men who believed in taking care of each other's widows. Helen, I said to Mrs. Henderson, what happened to that network? The big companies broke it, she said. They paid some of us, scared others into silence, made us all think we were alone. We're not alone anymore. Angela looked around the room at all the women who'd found their voices, all the families who'd reclaimed their dignity. Mama, what happens now? I thought about James's promises, about the foundation we were building, about Tyler growing up knowing that his great-grandfather had been a man of honor whose legacy was finally secure. Now we make sure it never happens again. What would you do if your fight for personal justice became a movement that helped hundreds of other families? Would you be satisfied with winning your own case, or would you keep fighting for people you've never met? We'd already decided. The fight was just beginning. And I had a feeling James would have loved watching us take on the whole state of Kentucky, one crooked company at a time. 2 years later, I sat in my new office overlooking downtown Louisville, reading another case file from a widow in Tennessee whose husband's construction company had been cheated out of $600,000. The Dorothy Mitchell Foundation had handled 47 cases in 2 years, recovering over $30 million for families who thought they were powerless. My secretary buzzed the intercom. Mrs. Mitchell, your daughter is here. Angela walked in carrying coffee and wearing the kind of confident smile I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. Mama, how's the warrior queen of widow justice today? Busy. Mrs. Patterson in Nashville needs help with a case against Henderson Construction, no relation to our Mrs. Henderson, thankfully. Any relation to the Patterson family? None. Apparently Patterson is just a popular name for people who like to cheat widows. We both laughed. It had taken time, but Angela and I had found our way back to each other. The divorce from Marcus had been finalized 6 months ago, giving her half of everything he'd owned, which, after restitution payments, wasn't much. But she didn't seem to mind. She'd moved back to Ohio with Tyler, gotten a job at the foundation, and discovered she had a talent for investigative work that would have made her father proud. Speaking of the Patterson family, Angela said, settling into the chair across from my desk, I got a letter yesterday. From who? She pulled an envelope from her purse. Robert Patterson. From prison. I took the letter and read it carefully. His handwriting was different now, smaller, more humble. The arrogance was gone. Mrs. Mitchell, the letter read, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I think about you and your family every day. I think about all the families we hurt, all the women we made feel powerless when they deserved respect. My grandson asks about his grandfather sometimes, and I don't know how to explain that I was the kind of man who stole from widows. But I tell him about you. I tell him about the brave woman who refused to stay quiet, who demanded justice not just for herself but for everyone. I tell him that someday, if he's lucky, he'll be half as strong as Dorothy Mitchell. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that you changed me, even if it took prison bars to complete the lesson. I set the letter down and looked out my window at the Louisville skyline. Somewhere in this city, Marcus was working as a construction foreman, having lost everything but learning to build his life on honest work. Tyler visited him every other weekend, and according to Angela, the boy was proud that his father was finally earning money instead of inheriting it. "Are you going to write back?" Angela asked. "I don't know. What do you think?" "I think Daddy would say that forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not for the person who hurt you." She was right. James always believed people could change if the consequences were severe enough. Maybe Robert Patterson had finally learned what integrity looked like. My phone rang. Mrs. Henderson's number. "Dorothy, dear, turn on Channel 6 News. You need to see this." I found the remote and clicked to the local station. A reporter stood outside a courthouse in Tennessee, holding a microphone and looking serious. Today marks the conclusion of the Henderson construction case, where the Dorothy Mitchell Foundation helped the widow of contractor Samuel Brown recover $1.2 million in unpaid debts. Mrs. Brown says this victory will allow her to send her grandchildren to college and finally retire with dignity. The camera cut to Mrs. Brown, a woman about my age with steel gray hair and determined eyes. "I want to thank Dorothy Mitchell and her foundation. She proved that widows don't have to accept being cheated. We don't have to be grateful for scraps when we're owed the whole meal." Angela reached over and squeezed my hand and smiled. "Mama, you've started something bigger than you ever imagined." The news story continued with footage from our original courthouse victory 2 years ago. There I was, walking down those same steps where everything had begun. But the woman on that screen looked different from the one sitting in this office now. That Dorothy had been fighting for her own dignity. This Dorothy was fighting for something much larger. "Mrs. Henderson called this morning," I told Angela. "She wants to expand the foundation to cover medical debt cases. Apparently there are families whose loved ones died owing money to doctors who never got paid. Are we equipped for that? We'll learn. Jennifer's bringing in 2 new lawyers next month." My computer chimed with an email notification. Another case, this one from a widow in Alabama whose husband's trucking company had been cheated out of their final payment before he died of a heart attack. The amount owed, $47,000. Not enough to make headlines, but enough to mean the difference between keeping her house and moving in with relatives who didn't want her. "What's that one?" Angela asked, reading over my shoulder. "Transportation case. Trucking company in Montgomery refused to pay because they claimed the delivery was late." "Was it?" "Her husband died of a heart attack in their parking lot while trying to collect payment." "I'd say that qualifies as a legitimate delay." Angela's face hardened. "Some people have no shame." "No, but they have lawyers. And now so do we." I pulled up the foundation's account balance on my computer. 2 years of settlements and donations had given us enough funding to operate for 5 more years without taking another case. But every week brought new families, new stories of deliberate theft disguised as business disputes. "Mrs. Washington called yesterday," I continued. "She's getting married again. At 81. Who's the lucky man?" "The attorney who handled her case. Apparently fighting for justice together creates strong bonds." We both laughed, but I felt a pang of longing. James had been gone 4 years now, and while I'd found purpose in our fight for justice, I still missed having someone to share victories with. Someone to hold me when the cases got too heartbreaking. Someone to remind me that not all men were thieves. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever wonder what Daddy would think about all this? The foundation, the publicity, the way we've changed?" I thought about James, about his gentle hands and quiet integrity. About the way he believed in building things that lasted longer than the materials they were made from. I think he'd be proud that we didn't let his legacy die with him. I think he'd love knowing that his work is still protecting families he never met. Even though we destroyed the Patterson family in the process? That was the question that kept me awake some nights. Robert Patterson in prison, his construction company bankrupt, his employees scattered to other firms. Marcus starting over at 45, learning to build his reputation one honest job at a time. The Patterson name permanently associated with fraud and theft. Angela, your father taught me that actions have consequences. The Patterson family chose to steal from grieving widows for 40 years. Those consequences were always coming. We just made sure they arrived. But what about mercy? What about forgiveness? I picked up Robert Patterson's letter from prison and read it again. The remorse seemed genuine, but remorse didn't resurrect the women who died poor while he lived rich on their husbands' money. Mercy without justice isn't mercy. It's just enabling. I set the letter aside. But justice without mercy isn't justice either. It's just revenge. So which one did we choose? Before I could answer, my secretary buzzed again. Mrs. Mitchell, there's a young man here to see you. Says his name is David Patterson. Angela and I exchanged glances. David Patterson was the accountant who'd provided the evidence that destroyed his own family. But he was also in his 70s. This had to be someone else. Send him in. The young man who entered my office looked like Marcus would have 20 years ago. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the Patterson family's distinctive jaw but softer eyes. He carried a manila folder and moved with the careful respect of someone entering sacred ground. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm David Patterson Jr. Robert Patterson was my grandfather. Angela tensed beside me, but I gestured for him to sit. What can I do for you, Mr. Patterson? I'm a senior at the University of Louisville. Majoring in business law. He opened his folder and pulled out a thick document. I've been researching your foundation for a class project on business ethics. And? I want to work for you. Unpaid internship, full-time this summer, part-time during the school year. He met my eyes directly. I want to help you recover money for families like yours. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. A Patterson wanting to work for the Dorothy Mitchell Foundation. A member of the family we destroyed asking to help us destroy other companies like theirs. Why? Angela asked before I could speak. Because my grandfather was a thief. Because my father spent his whole life unknowingly living off stolen money. Because my little sister asks me why everyone at school whispers about our last name. His voice cracked slightly. Because I want the Patterson name to mean something honorable before I die. I studied his face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was some elaborate scheme to sabotage our work. All I saw was a young man carrying his family's shame and looking for a way to transform it into something redemptive. What makes you think I'd trust a Patterson with sensitive case information? Nothing. You shouldn't trust me. You should test me, watch me, make me prove that I'm different from the men who came before me. He leaned forward. Mrs. Mitchell, I know you have every right to hate my family. But I'm asking for the chance to help fix what they broke. Even if it means testifying against other companies? Even if it means your name being associated with destroying business empires? Especially then. I looked at Angela, who was watching young David with something that might have been hope. Tyler's generation deserved to grow up knowing that people could choose to be better than their family's worst impulses. Mr. Patterson, if I even suspect you're here to gather information to help other companies avoid prosecution, I will destroy you so completely that your great-grandchildren will feel the consequences. Yes, ma'am. If I find out you're recording our conversations or copying our files or sharing our strategies with anyone, you'll discover that I can be much more vindictive than your grandfather ever imagined. I understand. And if you think this job will help rehabilitate your family's reputation, you're mistaken. Working with us means accepting that the Patterson name will always be associated with theft. Are you prepared for that? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were clear and determined. Mrs. Mitchell, my family's reputation is already destroyed. But maybe I can help make sure no other family has to go through what yours did. 2 hours later, after running background checks and having Jennifer conduct a preliminary interview, we offered David Patterson Jr. an unpaid internship with the Dorothy Mitchell Foundation. His first assignment, investigating a case in Georgia where a construction company owed $800,000 to a contractor's widow. Angela walked him out, and when she returned, she was shaking her head. Mama, did we just hire the enemy? I don't know. But I know this, your father always believed people could change if they faced the right consequences. Maybe David Patterson Jr. is proof that sometimes, justice creates more justice. That evening, I sat on my front porch in Ohio, watching the sun set over the same neighborhood where this whole journey had started. Tyler called from his college dorm to tell me about his criminal justice classes, about his plans to attend law school, about his determination to join the foundation after graduation. Grandma, Professor Williams says you're famous in legal circles. She says you've changed how debt collection works in 3 states. Your great-grandfather changed it, baby. I just made sure people knew about it. No, Grandma. You changed it. You took something terrible that happened to our family and turned it into something that helps other families. That's not just justice. That's transformation. After we hung up, I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been thinking about for months. I typed a response to Robert Patterson's letter from prison. Mr. Patterson, I wrote, I received your letter. I don't forgive you, because forgiveness isn't mine to give. You didn't just steal from me, you stole from 15 other families, and some of those women died poor because of your choices. But I want you to know that your grandson has chosen to spend his life fixing what you broke. Maybe that's the real justice, not just punishment for the guilty, but redemption for the innocent who carry their burden. Your family name will always be associated with theft. But maybe now it can also be associated with making things right. I sealed the letter and set it on my kitchen table to mail tomorrow. Then I walked to James's photograph on the dresser and touched the glass gently. We did it, baby. We made sure your legacy meant something. And maybe we taught a new generation that integrity isn't inherited, it's chosen. Outside my window, the street lights were coming on, illuminating the quiet neighborhood where an ordinary widow had once lived believing she was powerless. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone who understood that justice isn't about destroying enemies, it's about building a world where future families don't need to fight the battles you fought. The Dorothy Mitchell Foundation would outlive me. Tyler would carry it forward, maybe with David Patterson Jr. beside him. 2 families, once enemies, now united in the belief that stealing from widows should come with consequences severe enough to make other companies think twice. James had been right about building things that lasted. We just built ours with lawsuits instead of concrete, with justice instead of steel, with the unshakable conviction that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they refused to accept being dismissed. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new fights, new families who needed to know they weren't powerless. But tonight, I sat in the peace that comes from knowing you've transformed your pain into purpose, your anger into action, your personal grievance into generational change. The will that had started everything was still locked in my safety deposit box. But the real will, the determination to ensure justice for families like mine, that was written in courtroom victories, foundation files, and the grateful letters from widows who'd finally received what their husbands had earned. Some legacies are built with money. Others are built with the unshakable belief that right should triumph over easy, that truth should triumph over comfortable lies, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a grieving widow can do is refuse to stay quiet. I'd chosen right. And I had a feeling James, wherever he was finally sleeping peacefully.